Hello and good evening. It's 8 p.m. UK time, so it is time to start our next IVF webinar tonight as we have yet another topic. And this time we are, connecting with Portugal. So, hi, Dr. Vladimiro. How are you feeling tonight?
Hi, Caroline. I'm fine. Thank you. Very
Happy to
happy to be here again.
Very happy that you have joined us again, as this is our second webinar with you. So glad to see you as well right here. Please let us know, everyone, that you can hear us so we can make sure all is working. But first, let me just also remind everyone that we are here every single day just to support you throughout your waiting for the actual treatment to be able to start to continue. So we are that's why Stronger Together initiative has been created, and this has been also possible thanks to our ambassadors and partners. As always, I want to definitely thank them for their support. You can see all of them right here as well. And thank you so much for confirming that you can hear me. And tonight, as I've mentioned, we have another interesting topic to discuss, and this is non-anonymous egg, sperm, and embryo donation in Portugal. And with us tonight is Dr. Vladimiro Silva, who is an embryologist, CEO, and founder and IVF lab director at Ferti Centro and Procrear clinics in Portugal. It's good to have you back. And I will just simply say that we will start with the presentation, and afterwards it will be time for your questions. You know what to do. Just simply type in the questions so that Dr. Vladimiro can answer them for you, and I'm sure he will be happy to do so. So I guess we can start. Dr. Vladimir, are you ready?
Yes, I am, Caroline. Just to make sure, is my presentation in full screen right now?
It's okay. It's yes, it's going to look
It-
like this, okay? But I
okay.
believe patients, if you our patients are able to see it, so if just to make sure, if you could let us know, but I believe
Mhm.
everything is working just fine.
Okay, wonderful. So,
Thank you.
Caroline, once again, many thanks for having me here. It's always a pleasure to participate in this kind of events, and it's obviously also a pleasure to talk to patients and other persons about the situation in Portugal. This time, we're talking about our IVF legislation. We're very proud of it because I think we have one of the most progressive and patient-friendly legislation in IVF in whole Europe right now. And so I will tell you a little bit about the story, about how things work in here, and obviously a few details. I will share a few thoughts on this issue as well. And so let's take it from here. So the first thing that I would like to tell is that here in Portugal, we had, like many other countries, a legislation where donors were anonymous. And we were good, okay? We were happy with our legislation. We were doing treatments. Everything was working. We had donors. And we were happy. And then from a moment to the other, in a totally unexpected way, the Constitutional Court, the Portuguese Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in the country, suddenly changed the law. It was on the 24th of April, 2018, and it was sort of an accident. The anonymity legislation was dragged by an evaluation on the surrogacy law, which has nothing to do with this, but by accident, some members of the parliament also pled to the Constitutional Court against the anonymity of the donors, and the same court that 9 years before had ruled in favor of the anonymity of the donors then changed his mind and decided that donors should no longer be anonymous. Since this was the highest court in the country, there's no appeal, and so from a second to the other, it was on the 24th of April 2018, we simply lost all donors. I can tell you that I remember exactly where I was when I received that information, because everybody was completely surprised. No one saw this coming. And well, there were treatments that were being done on that very next day, and we were not able to conclude those treatments because donors were anonymous, and they have agreed to donate under anonymity, and so we couldn't use their cells because from a moment to the other they were no longer anonymous. And not only that, but anonymous donors were no longer authorized in Portugal. So we had to start working, and this is what we do. In the first 2 weeks of this legislation, we called more than 600 persons. We were calling all of our donors, asking them whether they accept to donate under non-anonymity conditions, and we were explaining them the law. We were obviously trying to talk to them about the process. It was very complicated, either from a psychological point of view. We had to do a lot of counseling to the donors, and so we spent hours and hours and hours at the phone, everybody at the clinic, nurses, embryologists, doctors, psychologists, everybody was talking on the phone with donors. So in order to explain how things were, in order to ask them whether they would still agree to still donate under the new legislation. And we had this very nice surprise, because at our clinic, at least at Ferti Centro, 97% of our registered egg donors accepted to be non-anonymous, and 70% of our sperm donors also accepted to be non-anonymous. And so obviously those were the donors who were already in the process, but we had to start campaigning because we were afraid that what happened in other countries also happened in Portugal. We saw that in the UK, when the non-anonymity legislation was put in place, the number of donors had dropped very, very suddenly. And so we started, there were official campaigns from public IVF centers, the Portuguese Society for Reproductive Medicine, and the Patient Association. They also started campaigns for donation. All of the private IVF centers also did their own campaigns. And so we had the most incredible surprise that donations peaked. We've never had this many donors. So it was a complete unexpected effect, totally counterintuitive, and even maybe paradoxical. So when we changed from anonymity into non-anonymous donation, we ended up having more donors than ever before. Right now, for example, at Ferti Centro, we have more than 2,000 registered egg donors. We have hundreds of sperm donors, all of them non-anonymous. Obviously, they're not all available to donate all the time, but there's absolutely no shortage of donors in the private sector. And so in Portugal, we've made the transition from a model where donors were anonymous and we didn't have this many donors, to a model where donors are non-anonymous and there are lots of donors, which I believe is a very unique situation in Europe. And so we've established a private egg and sperm bank. We are allowed to send cells to other countries. We were the first egg and sperm bank in the country to work like that. And so we are very happy with this situation of our current legislation. And so, as I said in the beginning, I believe, well, I have to say, because when initially I was against this, because I thought that we would lose all donors. When I saw it in practice, and especially when I started talking to patients, to the patients that were undergoing the process, I changed my mind, and obviously I regret everything I said back then, because I was a fierce defender of anonymous donations. And now I completely changed my mind, because by talking to donors, by talking to patients, by seeing how things work in the field, it is completely different. Not only there's no shortage of donors, but I think this current legislation of ours is a lot more ethical and a lot more respectful over the human rights. And so, just to tell you a little bit about our legislation, which I believe is one of the most progressive and patient-friendly in Europe, children born from donations have the right of access to the identity of their donors at the age of 18. The access to this ID is granted and guaranteed by the Portuguese state, which means that even if a clinic closes, the National IVF Authority will have the possibility of giving the person born from the donation the information on the identity of his or her donors. This information about donors is kept for 75 years. This is very important in terms of traceability. This also means that if, let's say, someone at the age of 18 doesn't necessarily want to meet or have access to the information of their donor, they don't have to decide on that moment. So they can change their mind at the age of 30 or at the age of 40, because the information would still be available. Also, the number of donations per donor is very limited. For example, egg donors can donate 4 times through her lifetime. It is controlled because we have to register everything in the database of the National IVF Authority, and it's very transparent, because it can't be more transparent than disclosing the donor's ID. Also, when we're dealing with non-anonymous donors, any potential fraud or intent of donating more than the limited number of times will be very easily found. So our system doesn't permit that someone is donating sperm in 10 different IVF centers, because at the end of the day, there's a limit on the number of donations, and there's a central registry for all of that. So we know that the limit on egg donations and the limit on sperm donations, once it is achieved, that donor gets blocked, and he or she cannot be used anywhere. As I said, egg donors can donate 4 times in her lifetime, separated by 3 months, while sperm donors can donate up to 8 families, can have children in 8 different families. Also, the process of donor compensation is very transparent in Portugal. It is fixed by law. It's currently on 878 euros for egg donors and 44 euros for every sperm collection. It is the same for our public and private centers. We can only pay by bank transfer or check. We cannot pay in cash. Donors sign a receipt. So again, everything is very transparent and very traceable, and there are no questions about this. We can't pay more, we can't pay less. It's fixed by law. It is as simple as that. And so moving a little bit about the importance of anonymity and the Portuguese legislation, and why did I change my mind about it? In fact, this is about a person. So this is about the human right, because getting to know your origin is something that everybody wants. And so, and it is also something that you can't help, not nowadays, and certainly not in the future. So nowadays we have websites like MyHeritage or 23andMe, where you just can send a swab from your oropharyngeal mucosa, and then you'll get an information on your genetic profile and whether you have cousins or any related person registered in the database. It is very cheap. It is very easy. You can order a kit from the internet, and then you'll get all of that information. There are even associations, like, for example, this association in France. They have already revealed 37 donors, especially sperm donors, and found 186 siblings. It's an association called PMA non-anonymity. So, I mean, so it is impossible, because the identity of the donor, it's always possible to find by the using of genetic testing. And so, like this article says, it was published in Human Reproduction, which is a scientific publication from the European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology. They said, in practical terms, it shows that there's no such thing as an anonymous donor. What we have, because that information about the donor is always possible to find. If you do, it's like sending a message in a bottle into the ocean, but it's very likely that that bottle comes back or finds its destination, because nowadays with these huge databases of genetic information growing bigger every day, it's very easy to find your origin. So it's pointless to try to hide that information. It's also pointless to make donors and their families pass through that process of having someone finding their origins. For example, in this is a graphic that I found in the website of DNA non-anonymity, where you can see the number of people whose genetic information is already in the database. And here you will see that, for example, one of the databases, Ancestry DNA, has already reached 15 million people. MyHeritage, for instance, is at 2.5 million. GED Match, it's around 10 million. So this is a lot of information. So it's very easy. So like you see another statistics from MyHeritage, 95 million users, 3.9 billion family tree profiles, to 12.4 billion historical records. So it is virtually impossible to keep the identity of the donor secret. And in fact, we don't even need the donor to register himself in these databases. If you can find a couple of donors' cousins, sometimes that's enough to find the donor, because you contact these persons, they are your relatives, somehow you start talking, and then you end up very easily, because we are living the era of social networks. Well, all the information is available and very easily accessible. And so by doing this, we can obviously find out who our donors are, and by keeping the law requiring anonymous donations, we are taking risks. For example, there's this case that was very famous in the Netherlands, where a single sperm donor has originated 106 kids and counting, because he has donated in many places. With anonymous donations, we lose control over the process. Things would be different if, for example, this gentleman would be aware that he would be found, because donors were not anonymous. If there was somebody controlling the number of donations, obviously he could donate in different countries, but it would be more difficult. So when we open the door to non-anonymous donations, we are also closing the door to this kind of situations, which are not good. Obviously, we want people to donate sperm, to donate eggs, but we don't want a single donor to originate 106 kids. And so there are other ways for donors to be found. We can use Y chromosome studies. For example, take this study from the University of Leicester, where a group of geneticists found that millions and millions of modern Asian men are descended from 11 very powerful dynastic leaders who lived up to 4,000 years ago, including Genghis Khan. So maybe I'm also a descendant of Genghis Khan, I don't know, but it is not difficult. You see, genetics, either through the Y chromosome, either through the X chromosome with mitochondrial DNA studies, allows us to find our origins these days. So it is very easy to see if someone is related to another person, and then if you allow your information to be registered in one of these databases, it's almost impossible that you don't find your anonymous donor. And so that could be a problem. Also, I forgot to mention, there are even specialized services on this. In the Netherlands, there is this donor detective service. In the USA, DNA detectives. In Canada, Carrefour ADN. So there are lots of ways to find the identity of the donor. So it's pointless to resource to anonymous donors. The only thing that we're doing while using an anonymous donor is losing control over the process. And in fact, because if you think about it, and there's also this declaration from the European Parliament about the rights of sperm and egg donors, where it says very clearly that international and European human rights law is moved towards recognitions of a right to know one's origins. So the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development believes that anonymity should be waived for all future gamete donations. Obviously, that this has to be balanced with the culture of in every country. Obviously, that this law shouldn't be applied retrospectively. That would be in Portugal. That possibility was put, and then the parliament legislated against it. And so only the donors that agreed to be non-anonymous are non-anonymous, in fact. And so it is where we are right now. So there is some pressure from the authorities, from even the European Court of Human Rights, towards having non-anonymous donations, because it is a human right. And so, like I was saying, getting to know the identity of a donor is something that we cannot help, and not nowadays, certainly not in the future. And so there are two options. We can provide the kids that are born from donations the access to the identity of their donors in a controlled and well-counseled way, where the state gives access to that information, where donors agree to donate under those circumstances, knowing that in the future someone might knock on his door and say, I was born from your sperm or from your eggs. Or we can do it in an uncontrolled way, where we use the so-called anonymous donors, and then a few years later, those donors who don't want to be found, who weren't even aware that it was possible for them to be found, who don't expect to be found, are discovered, and that could have an impact on their personal life, and obviously even for the child. You don't want to meet your sperm donor and be someone and found out that someone is very upset with that fact because he donated under anonymous conditions. So it's different when you're looking for a sperm or an egg donor, and you know that that person, while donating, knew that he or she could be contacted, or his identity would be revealed to the child. It's completely different than what happens when that comes as a surprise, as something that you don't control, or at least it can also be very frustrating, because some of the donors are in fact impossible to be found. And so some children born from donation can hire a DNA detective, can send their DNA to a lot of databases all over the world, and still might have not finding their donors. They can be very frustrated about it because it's part of their right, of their personality, and so there is no reason today to keep doing anonymous donations. It is something. It is a right of the children that aren't yet born. It's something that we cannot help. I mean, if we are strong believers that donors should remain anonymous, it's something that we cannot help because donors will not be anonymous. It's impossible with the way that technology is progressing right now. So we are really choosing between giving that information in a controlled or an uncontrolled way. Okay, and so this is why, as I was saying in the beginning, I believe the Portuguese legislation is the best solution because no donors are surprised by unexpected genital offspring knocking on their doors. Every family controls how and when the information is disclosed. So we don't want your kids to find this by accident, to have someone calling them and saying, "I'm your cousin," without them knowing that they were born from a sperm or an egg donations. In Portugal, with our system and the very transparent way, the commitment of the official authorities, not only the Portuguese IVF authority, the patients associations, the public hospitals, and so donation is seen like a very good thing, something that you should be proud of doing. So we don't have any problem with the availability of donors in private centers, only in public centers. But this is the causes are not the lack of donors available to donate. It's more about financing issues. But so we don't have waiting lists. Our treatments are affordable because Portugal is not a very expensive country, and so and also we have a controlled number of donations. Obviously, all other countries you can have a controlled number of donations without disclosing the identity of the donor, but still it is easier to do it when the donor knows that his identity would be revealed. So again, it is also, so there's not only what's written in the law, but also the effect of this, of changing the mind of persons. Someone who, like that guy from the Netherlands, who wants to donate and have 100 kids, will think twice because he knows that within a few years from that moment could backfire on him. So I mean, it's always preferable to have more control over this than to leave this to the anonymity. And so it is important to have transparency in the donor compensation process, also the number of donations, and and it is also extremely important that the access to the origins should be granted by the state and not by a private entity. And it is important to keep this information for a very long time, like it is legally required here in Portugal. And so this was my message. I see that there are a lot of comments. I haven't read a single one of them. At our clinic, we would be very happy to have you doing treatments with us. You can call or write us in English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Dutch, or obviously Portuguese, which is our preferred language. But we have native speakers for all of the other languages, aside from English, actually. So we're very happy to help you and to assist you with their project, and obviously to discuss the benefits and how the things work in Portugal.
Excellent. Thank you so much for a
Thank
very
you, Caroline.
very informative presentation, and of course for all the details you provided. Definitely interesting. What I think you have mentioned in our previous webinar is that that anonymous option, when the child is able to find out when turns 18, it's that it gives those children options. Yes, they can choose whether they want to find out or simply not. And as you said, maybe in the future they can change their mind. So this is
Yeah.
definitely interesting. Thank you so much. And yes, as you
Okay.
saw, there are plenty of questions ready, very interesting ones for sure. So thank you already for your questions. We will go ahead with them right now. So the first question is right here. I appreciate the fact that you were non-anonymous. When I started the egg and sperm donation process, I was very surprised that most countries prohibit it. I wonder why.
It is. It's also a cultural thing. Um, I don't know. Well, I can talk for other countries. In Portugal, it has always been allowed since we had this IVF legislation in the first place. But obviously, it is related to a more conservative view of the society. We all know that in some religions, donations are not well seen. And obviously, we always have extremist groups that are anti-IVF, and so we have people who are against, for example, the Catholic religion. In some members of some more extremist vision of the Catholic religion are against donation. In the Muslim religion, some of them we have I don't know the words in English, but a part of the Muslims are in favor of the donation and authorize it, but some other part they are against it. And so Judaism also allows donation, but in certain circumstances. So religion and conservative values have always been essentially against donation. Okay, and that happens with all religions in many countries. And so sometimes it is more about the weight that those more conservative views of the society have in terms of government, in terms of lawmaking, the kind of influence that they have that end up giving these circumstances. There is also the historical background of the country. But for example, the first countries who authorized open donations were Sweden and the UK, which are known for having a very liberal and open view of the society and their habits. And obviously, we know that some other countries tend to be more conservative. So I believe that the tendency worldwide, like in other things, is for the more liberal views of society to take place. And this is one of the advantages of globalization, because we tend to think of the others, because for some families, this is the only way that they can have kids. And so there is no alternative to the donation. The alternative is not have kids. Okay, obviously adoption is also an option, but it's always different than having a child of your own. So that's my explanation. I think it has to be with the conservative values.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for answering that very first question. Definitely interesting as well. And when we are talking about the countries, like, do you think the non-anonymity will extend towards other countries like Greece?
Well, I actually don't know very well the political situation in other countries, but I believe that in 10 years from now, everywhere in Europe, the donation will be non-anonymous, because it's pointless to keep it anonymous. It will just bring a lot of suffering and to the children that are born from anonymous donations, and also to the parents of those children, because we can't help the disclosure of the identity. If, let's say, someone decides not to share with their kids that they are born from an anonymous, from a donation, if that child later in life decides, just out of curiosity, just to get to know his origins, to send his a DNA swab to one of these data centers, he could find out that he has like 10 cousins in many different countries. And so here, the secret, there's no more secret. Okay, so it's preferable that they have access to the truth in a controlled way than to have the risk of finding it by accidents, because that will bring feelings of lack of trust to their parents. It's like almost like a treason. Okay, so I think Greece and every other country will move into non-anonymity. I don't know when, but I know that I don't know if it will take 10 years or 20, but it will certainly, it's an irreversible way, I believe.
Okay, thank you for that explanation once again. And yeah, definitely interesting for sure. And so I live in Spain at the moment, although I am not Spanish. Here, sperm donation is confidential, which does concern me as we can't cross borders right now. Is there any way to raise a clinic or sperm in Portugal?
Well, first of all, you can cross borders with a declaration that you are doing treatment, that you are crossing it for health reasons. We have received already some Spanish patients after we reopened the clinics and we resumed our normal activity. Since this change in legislation, we've received a lot of patients from Spain. So they are traveling by car because there are no flights at the moment. But at the border, they show a declaration from our clinic stating that they have a treatment scheduled with us, and they are allowed to pass. This person, L, you just have to send us an email and we will walk you through the process. It's actually very easy. You can start treatment in Spain and leave the last part to be done here in Portugal. However, in Spain, according to the current legislation, you cannot use a non-anonymous donor.
Of course. Thank you so much once again. And there's another question, of course, right here. You were referring to the European human rights law that allowed the non-anonymity of sperm and donors donation. Can you please tell us which specific law do you refer to? Do you think this could be lobbied in other EU countries? If the laws will be adopted in other countries later, do you think the identity could be revealed retroactively?
Well, these are a lot of questions. So,
Yes.
First of all, I actually there is a ruling from the European Court of Human Rights against the against the anonymity of donors. So, in favor of non-anonymity. I actually don't have any reference right here with me, but if you Google it, it's very easy to find. Also, that declaration that I've shown in my presentation is from the European Parliament. Okay, so it's also online. Maybe when this video is shared by myivfanswers.com, you can take another look, or you can just email me, and I will be very happy to send you the article by email, and maybe then I can also send you the information of the European Court of Human Rights. So, do I think this could be lobbied in other countries? Certainly, because it's already being done by the European Commission, by the European Parliament. Sorry, there is a lot of pressure over all countries to adopt this kind of legislation. And so, obviously, the more the pressure, the better, because I think everyone should move into this kind of legislation. I don't think, on the other hand, that the identity of the donors could be revealed retroactively, because we would be violating the donors' rights. Here in Portugal, that possibility was in place, that situation was discussed as a possibility, and luckily the parliament ruled against it, and they said that donors who have donated before the constitutional court decision would still remain anonymous, and the new donors will be non-anonymous, because we have to balance also the rights of those persons who very generously donated their cells to help other people forming their families, and they were not supposed to reveal their identity. It wouldn't be ethical to change the rules at the end of the game, you see. So I believe that, and in fact the European Parliament's declaration says the same, it shouldn't be retroactive, it should be only from that moment on. But again, as I said, I don't think there would be any difficulty to find the identity of those anonymous donors with the current. We don't even have to wait 10 or 20 or years in the future, because it is already possible right now.
All right, excellent. Once again, thank you so much for providing all the details. And well, another question is coming up here. So this is interesting as well. Do you also treat cases of embryo who are leftovers of other couples? I have heard that Spain and the US do it a lot, and it is called embryo adoption because there are many embryos frozen and not used anymore. These embryos may come from couples who did IVF and just produced more embryos than what is needed. Will the info about these couple also revealed?
Well, again, several questions. First question, yes, we do have embryo adoption in Portugal, and we have a lot of embryos available for adoption. Unfortunately, there is some bureaucracy associated with the adoption process, but we do have embryos available for adoptions. However, regarding the last part of the question, will the infos about these people be revealed? It will depend, because right here in Portugal, an embryo can only be donated after it stays at least 3 years frozen. So this means that today, we are in May 2020, the most recent embryos available for donation have been donated in May 2017. So this was before the non-anonymity law. So these embryos were donated in conditions of anonymity. If the parents, if the father and the mother of those embryos have agreed to be non-anonymous, they can be donated in non-anonymous conditions. If they didn't agree to be non-anonymous, the only way that these embryos can be used is in a non-anonymous way. Once we get to 2021, we will have the first non-anonymous donated embryos, I hope, and we will have, because we already have some papers signed. And so all of those embryos will be, the access to the identity of the progenitors of those embryos will be granted by law, obviously.
Excellent. Thank you so much again for clarifying this. Okay, we have more questions coming up. So let me show you. So is your clinic private or public?
Private.
Okay, just a short question.
It's easier.
For clarifying. And also there's another one about the donors. Do you have Christian donors?
Yes, of course. Here in Portugal, like 90% or even more of the population is Christian and Catholic, and so almost all of our donors are Christians. We don't make any, that's not a factor while selecting the donor. Usually, we don't ask people about their religion, but I mean, it's just common statistics. We have donors. I mean, we live in a country where more than 90% of the population is Christian, so it would be impossible not to have Christian donors.
Of course. Thank you once again for clarifying that. I can see that someone asked to be contacted. Thank you for providing your email address. And yes, that's really, really good. Happy to hear that. And is the cost of non-anonymity, is it different than for anonymous? For example, if you purchase sperm from the Danish sperm bank, the prices are different.
Here in Portugal, all donors are non-anonymous. So we are authorized to use anonymous donors from before the change in legislation. So we have a few, but we don't make any distinction. It's the same. Well, at least at Ferti Centro, our clinic, we only the cost of using a non-anonymous sperm donor is the same of using an anonymous one. It's always 450 euros, and there's no difference in costs. Okay, we also using a donor sperm here, at least at Ferti Centro and Procrear, we costs always the same. So we don't make any distinction between the two types of donors.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And for now, at least it seems that this is going to be our last question. However, if you have any left, I definitely encourage you to type those in the chat section so that Dr. Vladimir can help you out. And the question is, so does your clinic help single women, and to what age?
Of course, we help single women, also women's couples. We do shared motherhood and the ROPA method as well. So we here in Portugal, we can treat women with a male partner, single women, and also lesbian couples. We are allowed to treat women until the age of 50, excluding 50, which means 49 years and 364 days. So there's, again, it is a very liberal legislation and very inclusive as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much again for answering that question. At least for now, I do not see any other questions. So I just want to make sure that you have asked all of your questions. If not, just go ahead and type it in, as it is like a final call for those questions. And already I would like to thank Dr. Vladimiro for joining us tonight, for supporting our initiative. It's always a pleasure to have you with us here. And I know there is another upcoming webinar in June, 24th of June. We have another topic to discuss. So I'm very excited to hear that you will be back with us.
Right? Thank you, Caroline. It was really fun. It's always a pleasure to be here. I love these webinars. I was telling you before we got live that this is a fantastic initiative from your website. I think this is really supportive because in a lot of places, people are still not able to start their IVF treatment. Their lives are on hold because of all of this coronavirus situation. I've seen just a few questions here. I will give quick answers. Yes. If you need to ask me something else, just send me an email. There's absolutely no problem. I'm very happy to share more details on the information that I've presented here. Also, the ethnicity of our donors. We have all kinds of donors. We don't have discriminations. Obviously, we have more Mediterranean style donors. That's good, but we also have Black and Asian and blonde donors. So we have, like I said, in the case of egg donors, we have more than 2,000 registered egg donors. So it's quite a lot of people. But again, Caroline, it was a a pleasure to be here. I have to congratulate you for this fantastic initiative, and so thank
Happy
you.
to do it always. So really, it's really nice to cooperate with you. And in the meantime, if you could take a look, there's another question just
Okay.
showed up here.
Well, we don't share photos of the donors. We can work with donors from the Danish sperm banks as long as they are non-anonymous. But here in Portugal, we I mean, I don't know if the other clinics are doing it, but at least at Ferticentro and Procrear, we're not sharing photos of the donors. We just give information on their phenotype and blood type, and also we can disclose some other non-identifying donors. It is very important for us that the person who is receiving the donation somehow relates to the donor. Obviously, sometimes we get all kinds of questions about the donors, like are they left-handed? Do they sing? Do they like rock music? I mean, sometimes we can give that information. We know that those are not genetic issues, but people need to feel a connection to the donor so they can feel right about the donation. And obviously, as long as it is non-anonymous information, information that doesn't disclose the donor's ID, that we can share at the moment, and because sometimes we don't know the answer for those questions, but we can talk to the patients about the donors and give them some non let's say non-phenotypic information about them, but we have to keep their identity confidential because it can only be revealed to the person born from the donation and when he or she reaches the age of 18.
Excellent. Once again, huge thank you for answering this question as well. And we will be finishing for tonight. So thank you all of you for joining us again, for your questions. And of course, just let me remind that this has been recorded. Therefore, you will have a chance to watch this again. You will find it on myivfanswers.com. And if you simply subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you will be updated when the new video is uploaded, but also you will be able to see when new event is actually approaching. As you know, we have plenty more events coming up. Even this week, there are like 8 events left. So stay tuned with us. We will be back here tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time, but also at 8 p.m. UK time. So I do hope you will be able to join us and to, well, simply get to know and find out a bit more on other topics. There are plenty more topics to come as well. Once more, Dr. Vladimiro, thank you so much. Have a lovely
Thank you,
evening
Caroline.
and
You
take
too.
care. Till the next time.
Till the next time. Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.